From Kansas State University, this is Agriculture Today. Eric Atkinson here. Coming right up, our annual end-of-year conversation with the Director for Extension here at K-State, Gregg Hadley. He'll reflect on the achievements of Extension in Kansas this past year, and he'll look forward to Extension's game plan for 2020. Specifically, he'll talk about the emphasis on programs dealing with rural stress. That's a priority that'll carry over into the new year as well. And Gregg also discusses other 2020 initiatives in the areas of succession planning and local food systems. Later, following today's agricultural news headlines, K-State's Charlie Lee on a new idea in deer repellent products based on using tannins from plants. All that and more here on Agriculture Today.
What is radon? Home exposure to radon gas is the leading cause of lung cancer death in the United States for non-smokers. In Kansas, 1 in 4 homes will test at or above the EPA action level. The Surgeon General recommends all homes be tested and fixed if necessary. Visit kansasradonprogram.org for more information. Test, fix, save a life. This message brought to you by the Kansas Radon Program, the Kansas Association of Broadcasters, and this station.
Thanks for tuning in. You're listening to Agriculture Today. Well, here we are toward the end of this calendar year. 2020 will be here in just a little over 2 weeks now. And at year's end, we'd like to bring by the Director for Extension here at Kansas State University for a glance back to the previous year and what's been happening in the Cooperative Extension Service here in Kansas, as well as a look ahead, and in this case, for the year 2020. Gregg Hadley has been good enough to join us once more. Gregg, just as you would glance back at 2019, what were some of the priorities for Extension going into this past calendar year?
Well, as always, we look towards offering great programs to the people of Kansas, and those programs will cover the gamut of all the major issues that are facing Kansans. So we worked hard at developing good programs that deal with global food systems issues, that deal with water issues, health issues, developing tomorrow's leaders, and also community vitality issues.
That's the framework by which Extension has operated for several years now. Would you describe it as a good year, a so-so year? How would you put it for Extension in 2019?
I think it was a very good year. This year we kind of concentrated on some internal improvements, getting input from our extension specialists and agents and staff about how to become better programmers in the future. Not that we're bad now, but you always look to improve in the future, and that's what we focused on this year.
So when you look at those priorities that Extension concentrates on, what were some of the highlights in as far as program priorities and accomplishments?
I think some of the major programming area that we emphasize, because it's so important to Kansas and will remain important to Kansas, is in the area of rural stress. And so there was a lot of endeavors and a lot of improvements made. And also we were lucky enough to receive some support from government and took advantage of other opportunities to really try to improve the rural stress issues.
Now, when you talk about rural stress, do you mean based on the farm economy, or is it broader than that?
Well, I think it's broader than that, but I would say that the major cause of that is the farm economy. When you think about a financial downturn, especially one that's prolonged in the ag industry, that causes issues with a lot of our town main streets, that causes issues with our local schools and everything. And so it's only natural that people feel stress both on the farm and business front, but also just in dealing with the stress. And so this year we had the opportunity to work with the College of Health and Human Sciences. They are starting a physician's assistant program there. And it just so happened that one of the physician assistants that were brought in to help lead that program is an expert in behavioral health. And not only that, but he practiced in rural areas. So he has a very good understanding of behavioral health issues, dealing with the farm economy, dealing with all of the tentacles that go out from the farm economy. His name is Bradley Dirks, and we're glad to have him on. And he will help lead us in the area of behavioral health.
He's a behavioral health specialist for Extension, first of his kind in the system.
That's right, the first of his kind. And a lot of systems do not have behavioral health specialists. I can, off the top of my head, I can think about maybe 3 or 4 in this kind of the central part of the United States where arguably it's probably needed the most.
So, Gregg, what is the planned outcome here? Additional programming in this area? Additional forms of outreach? Because when you talk about rural stress, it can be a touchy proposition, frankly.
It can be a touchy proposition. I think what we're doing is, trying to increase the knowledge about rural stress and some of the behavioral health issues that go along with that. Also looking at our infrastructure issues, because in rural areas, lots of times behavioral health providers are not abundant. And so how do we reach out there and provide those opportunities for people to seek help if they so choose? And also helping with our ag agents and specialists to be able to recognize the signs of people as they're working with their farmers, as they're working with rural families, about that, okay, this individual is in a really stressful situation. And so some of those will be provided through our traditional methods of educational delivery, and then others will be kind of infrastructure informational support. We were also one of 8 North Central Extension Regions institutions that received a federal grant to help provide more infrastructure information about behavioral health in rural areas. And so we're looking forward to seeing that. And we're working very closely with the Kansas Department of Agriculture and also some of our farm organizations out there to provide more information about behavioral health issues.
So the groundwork has been established here in 2019. This will unfurl in more detail likely in 2020. That's the plan.
Yeah, we are having a very large, in 2020, a very large interdisciplinary, which just means that our agents and specialists, no matter what their degree, background, and interest, comes together because they're so concerned about rural stress. We also have to look out at the great job that Kansas Ag Mediation Services is doing to help on the business side of navigating a poor farm economy. The work that our farm analysts do is they sit down with producers to try to figure out more financially efficient ways of conducting business, and also our Kansas Farm Management Association employees who work one-on-one with producers as well. And they'll be coming together to develop new programs, think about the rural stress issues, and develop the type of programming that we need to help the people of Kansas deal with this situation.
So that's on the burner for sure, but you look back at 2019 and there are so many examples we couldn't possibly round them all up right here, but agricultural programming is as strong as ever.
Agricultural program is as strong as ever. And when we think about moving forward with regards to agriculture, one of the big things that is happening this winter is the new Farm Bill information that the Department of Agricultural Economics is getting out and putting on this winter. And, of course, there's our normal things from animal science and industry, from our crop science side of things. So we will be there to cover the whole gamut of agriculture as we always have been.
Well, Gregg, one unique thing that you were engaged with here in the past year, 2019, you and colleagues were actively meeting with and interacting with international interests as they wanted to know more about the extension model here in Kansas. What was all of that about?
Yes, we've had several visitors, different delegations from Australia come over this year and in past years to talk about extension and engagement activities. And the reason they're here is a few years back, they essentially gave up their extension activities, and now they're trying to figure out how to bring them back, because what they found is extension provides the education that's needed, that is unbiased, research-based, and they're lacking that objectiveness with regards to receiving this continuing education for producers and families in Australia. And so we've talked to them about our model, how we go about things. They're very impressed with K-State Research and Extension, with our local unit input that we receive from all of our counties and districts. And so that's one example of people coming to Kansas to learn about extension. Another example is actually us going out to a country. This year we went to Uganda to talk with faculty at Makerere University. And there we talked about the extension and engagement model that we had. Their extension model is based in their Ministry of Agriculture, and we actually were able to sit down with their director for extension in the entire country of Uganda and talk about similarities, talking about differences, talking about how to better get that university-backed research into their extension programs in the Ministry of Agriculture and how to support them better. And so that was a wonderful time over there. I've received several emails since then about people going back to their communities, once again, very interested in our local community model for extension in the country of Uganda.
We need to step aside for a few moments, Gregg. We want to come back afterward and look ahead to 2020 and the Cooperative Extension Service out of K-State. If you'd stand by.
Okay.
Gregg Hadley with us, the Director for Extension at Kansas State University, here on Agriculture Today.
Hamburgers, roast, ribs, steak, or whatever you prefer. Beef, it's what's for dinner. Kansas cattle farmers produce 7.5 million head of cattle per year. It takes about 7 tablespoons of peanut butter to get the same amount of protein in 1 serving of lean beef. Support your local Kansas farmers and ranchers. Eat beef. This message was brought to you by the K-State Animal Sciences Leadership Academy participants.
Agriculture Today is back now. Mike Side with us once again. Gregg Hadley, the Director for Extension here at Kansas State University. As is our custom, as another calendar year winds down, we just spent the first several minutes of the broadcast looking back on the year in Extension 2019 here in Kansas. So, Gregg, to 2020, and as part of this look ahead, we do need to look back a bit more, though, about structural changes in Extension here in Kansas, because there were a few in 2019. There are more on the docket for 2020, it sounds.
Yes. So I think what you're getting to, Eric, is our increased districting efforts across the state. This past fiscal year in 2019, we had our first district in the southwest area of Kansas come online. That is the Wild West District, and it is made up of Haskell, Stevens, and Seward counties. And so they came online this year, and they've been doing a great job down there. They have already seen the advantages of what agent specialization does, providing better educational opportunities for the areas that they serve.
So that was the new one established this past year. There are others in the mill, not quite to the point of completion and announcement yet, but they are in the works, you say.
Yes. And so there is one that is going to be coming online in 2020. And so we're looking forward to that. And there's a possibility of another district, another 2-county district coming online in 2020 as well. And so there's a lot of processes that we have to go through in order to form a district. It's not something that we can do willy-nilly. And so we're not going to be saying much more on those because you never know what's going to happen. But
they're pending.
They are pending. And so we will leave it at that, but we're excited that we've got 2 more districts that are scheduled to come online this next year.
And we really didn't explain, but districting amounts to multiple counties pooling their resources to support an extension staff and operations that can specialize in the various areas.
Yes, they specialize in various areas. So just a very simple example, let's say you have 3 counties that are coming together. Each county has their own family and consumer sciences agent, and within that county, they have to provide all of the gamut of topics that FCS agents cover. When you go into a district, then you can have the FCS agents within that district specialize. So the county agent from County A may focus on family resources, providing financial information of the family. And so that is one thing. The person at County B, they may be providing information with regards to health and nutrition information. And then the third county, County C, that agent there may focus on kind of family development type issues.
And in the agricultural realm, we've seen livestock agents, crops agents, maybe agents with another specialty, if you will, management, horticultural agents. Yes. So it works in many, many ways.
It works in many, many ways. And so by being able to specialize, we can deliver much more impactful programs to deal with the issues that those local units are dealing with.
So be listening for more news on extension districting in the year 2020. As far as programming overall for Extension, you say there are 3 main areas of emphasis in Extension's outreach efforts for the year ahead.
Yes. So this year we started an initiative that we are going to approach 3 very important issues in Kansas in an interdisciplinary way. And in that interdisciplinary way, what that means is agents and specialists, regardless of their educational background, if they are very interested in an issue, they come together and kind of think about the issue in a holistic manner rather than this group of specialists and agents doing this project, which may or may not align with this program over here, but really coming at it from a holistic, multidisciplinary way. So the 3 areas that these interdisciplinary teams are going to focus on are rural stress, which you and I have talked about before, but also local food systems, and then succession. And that succession is broader than just farm succession, although that's what it will include. But it will also include such things as rural business and community business succession. There are a lot of businesses out there that owners do not have an heir that they're able to pass on to. So how do we pass that on? The other thing that we're looking at is kind of community leadership succession. It's often said that when everybody goes to the various community organizations, they always see the same people. And when you think about the aging of our society, well, who's going to be the next generation of leaders for those communities? And so we're taking a broad look at the community succession.
Some of those principles of succession may apply to, well, all 3 perhaps.
That's
Is
right.
that the thought?
That's right. And as you know, my background, my expertise was in farm succession. There are concepts that move straight over into that Main Street business succession and in leadership succession as well. I would like to go back to the local food systems, and lots of times people think of local food systems as, well, that's an issue that our more urban environments are concerned about. But when you look across rural Kansas, I mean, there's a lot of places in Kansas where they're doing a 2-hour one-way drive to get to a grocery store that's sizable enough to meet the needs of their family.
Still.
Yeah. And so there are local food systems issues all across Kansas, and some would say actually maybe in those rural areas is where thought needs to be given to it the most.
And as far as Extension's operative role in that area, it's to generate discussion about alternatives and ways to remedy that food desert, if you will, in a given location?
Yeah, food desert. Now, food desert just means that there aren't a lot of locations where fresh food, high-quality food is available. And so how do you do that? Well, maybe that means a group of producers start raising some of the food products that are needed specifically for that area. You need to think about, okay, how are you going to market that food so that consumers and producers can come together. You have to think about food safety concerns. And the great thing about K-State Research and Extension is we have the knowledge and expertise to deliver on all of those areas.
So looking ahead to 2020, Extension's plate is full, and then some.
Yes, that's right. We're always busy, and this doesn't mean that we are just going to concentrate on these three areas. We're going to do the work that we always do. Our agents and specialists in our program focus teams are going to be delivering on our crops programs, on our livestock programs, on our health and nutrition programs, just like we always have. When you think about the extension in Kansas, people in Kansas are used to us. They're used to the K-State Research and Extension logo. They're used to what we do, and sometimes we take it for granted what we do. Mm-hmm. But when you talk to people in my position, directors of Extension across the United States, when people think about Extension, they think about K-State Research and Extension as being at the top of the list. And that's for a variety of reasons. Our specialists, but also the fact that we are still locally based and still put a large emphasis on working with those counties and districts to develop the best programming for those counties and districts.
Very well. Well, Gregg, we appreciate the look back and the look ahead, and wish you and all of those involved in Extension leadership here at K-State the best in 2020. Happy holidays to you.
Happy holidays to you and everybody listening, Eric.
Thanks for being by. Gregg Hadley, the Director for Extension here at Kansas State University. Now, our time here with Gregg is the first in a series of visits here on the broadcast this week. Following this same theme, a retrospect on the year just past and a glance ahead to the coming year, we'll have similar conversations this week with the Associate Director of Research for K-State's College of Agriculture, Marty Draper, and the Dean of the K-State College of Agriculture, Ernie Minton. They'll be mic side with us later on this week. You are tuned in to Agriculture Today. We'll step aside now for a few moments. Then a look at today's agricultural news headlines for you. Also, K-State's Mike Brook is standing by with this week's edition of Milk Lines, and our weekly conversation with K-State's Charlie Lee is also yet to come here on the K-State Radio Network. Please keep it right here.
Did you know every Kansas farmer feeds 128 plus people?
Kansas farmers are hard workers, dependable, authentic, and sensitive.
Not only do farmers put food on your table, but they put clothes on your back and fuel in your car.
For more information about Kansas farmers, visit K-State Research and Extension online or stop by your local Extension office. This message has been brought to you by the K-State Animal Sciences Leadership Academy participants.
Agriculture Today continues now here on the K-State Radio Network. Eric Atkinson with you. Now to today's top stories in agricultural news, courtesy in part of DTN. Well, the road toward approval of the U.S.-Mexico-Canada trade agreement hit a bit of a bump to open this week. However, a quick exchange between U.S. and Mexican trade officials put that to rest. Mexico's Undersecretary for North America and its chief trade negotiator, Jesus Seade, had feared that language in the implementing legislation for USMCA had meant that the U.S. was going to send labor inspectors to Mexican plants. Yesterday, U.S. Trade Representative Robert Lighthizer quickly fired off a letter to assure Seade that the Department of Labor attachés that would be in Mexico were not labor inspectors, and he pledged that the attachés would abide by all relevant Mexican laws. Lighthizer said the use of the attachés was routine and that the Labor Department attachés would work with their Mexican counterparts, workers, and civil society groups on implementation of the Mexican labor reform. Now, at an event then in Washington, Seade declared Lighthizer's response as easing his fears, saying he was very satisfied and noting that other authorities in Mexico were also pleased. Further, Seade indicated that Mexico has not found any other issues in the implementing legislation that would be questionable. The Mexican Senate, back on December the 12th, approved the modifications to the pact, that on a 107-1 vote. Here in the U.S., the House is expected to vote yet this week, but the Senate will not take up the USMCA legislation until later in January, after the impeachment trial. Several U.S. commodity organizations are looking at the U.S.-China Phase 1 deal as an opportunity to sell more of their products to China. The president of the USA Poultry and Egg Export Council, Jim Sumner, said that Friday's deal opened an opportunity for as much as $2 billion in annual poultry exports to China. Meanwhile, U.S. pork exports to China were $1 billion in 2017, according to the U.S. Meat Export Federation, and Iowa State University analysis this past year, which was published before the swine fever outbreak, concluded that China could import $8.9 billion more U.S. pork once the tariffs are gone. Chinese officials at a press event signaled that they would buy some U.S. wheat and rice, among other commodities. And a member of the U.S. soybean industry is optimistic as well for increased bean exports to China. More on that from the USDA's Rod Bain.
News of the U.S. and China agreeing to the first phase of a new trade deal and China's agreement to increase purchases of ag goods is potentially good news for the one export commodity perhaps most impacted by the trade dispute between the two nations, soybeans. Ed Beeman of the U.S. Soybean Export Council says pre-trade disruption.
Traditionally, the U.S. exports about 60% of its soybeans. China was a very large percentage of that market.
Even with the dispute, China has remained the top global customer for U.S. soybeans, although at significantly reduced purchase amounts. Beeman believes that with implementation of Phase 1 of the trade agreement, coupled with continued efforts by the soybean industry over the last 2 years to foster relationships with both traditional and new Chinese buyers.
We're hopeful that that will continue to rise and bubble up, and we're able to continue to be the highest quality supplier of soybeans to China.
I'm Rod Bain reporting for the U.S. Department of Agriculture in Washington, D.C.
Now with this week's Milk Lines, here's K-State dairy specialist Mike Brook. Mike?
Today I'd like to visit with our Kansas dairy farmers about coaching on their farm. You know, this time of year with different sports programs ending, at least coming to the end of the seasons, and others starting, there's a lot of talk about how we coach our teams and a lot of reflection as to, well, how did the team do and what was the coach responsible for versus the team. So we think about our dairies. How's your team doing? You know, as a manager or as an owner of the dairy, it is really your team. So when was the last time you had a team meeting, really talked about how things were going on the dairy, or we just kind of choosing to ignore the obvious and try to move through every day? You know, a lot of times on our dairies, that's really the way it goes. We've got work to do, and we tend to ignore some things and just kind of move through the day. Over time, that generally builds up frustration with our team or with our crew, and usually leads to sometimes people leaving, other times people just not maybe engaged as much as you'd like them in their job. So When was the last time you did have a team meeting on your dairy? When's the next one due? As the manager, as the owner, I think is one of the really, really important things about these meetings is to just sit and listen to those that you have. And, depending on the size of your farm, that may be some key management people around the table. It might be your whole crew. It just kind of depends on the situation. Smaller farms, we maybe sit down with everybody. And larger farms, maybe that meeting occurs with just our key management people, and then the key management people have other meetings with the employees that are underneath them to communicate what needs to be communicated. So as a manager, make sure you sit and listen, and make sure you watch body language at the meeting too. That'll let you know pretty quick whether or not a person feels comfortable actually talking at the table or not. If they're not comfortable talking at the table, it might be a good time for you to have maybe a private meeting at another time to figure out what's wrong, maybe to get them a little bit more engaged. I'd encourage you to try to find some common ground during these meetings, some things that you guys can work together and try to solve. Finding common interest is also important as you meet with your employees. And try to find some things to celebrate as well. I know it's the holiday season, and times there are opportunities to do that, but it's always especially important anytime we come together for these team meetings that we find something to mention that's on the positive side. It should never be a meeting that's simply all negative. So as you think about organizing the meetings, some important things to think about would be, well, why are we getting together? What's the purpose? What items do you want to communicate? What do you want input on from your fellow employees? Then you need to devise a plan. If there's an issue that needs to be solved, devise a plan, come up with an action plan for that, execute the plan, and then take some time to evaluate whether or not the plan worked or if there's still some additional work to be done. If not, then it should be the time to celebrate. That should be part of your next team meeting. So again, I want to encourage our dairy farmers as we move through the winter season that we take time to evaluate things, maybe get to know our employees a little bit better, and to institute team meetings if we haven't done that already on our dairies. This is Mike Brook with K-State Research and Extension.
Thanks, Mike. This is Agriculture Today. Legal and financial concerns surround the day-to-day management of the agricultural industry. Producers, ag creditors, and USDA agencies rely on Kansas Agricultural Mediation Services. If you've received an adverse decision from the USDA or have an ag credit concern, call today, 800-321-3276, or visit us online, Kansas Agricultural Mediation Services, exploring options, generating solutions. Next up for you on Agriculture Today, our weekly visit with Charlie Lee, wildlife specialist with K-State Research and Extension. Look this week, Charlie, at deer repellent options and one new alternative that has been looked at through research recently. But before we get to that, there's an array of repellent products out there, is there not?
Certainly is a lot of interest in a repellent to prevent foraging or browsing by white-tailed deer. It's a common problem for people in lawns and landscapes, as well as agricultural producers. There are many compounds available. Often those compounds are based on smell or taste, and many of them are use blood meal or sulfur-based compounds, which are designed to mimic the fecal material from predators. That's been used quite frequently. Unfortunately, sometimes those repellents provide very little benefit in reduction of browsing by deer. So homeowners and agriculture producers are forced to look at other options to control white-tailed deer damage. Lethal control is sometimes not looked at favorably by the public or by the neighbors. So often the next system of really controlling the damage that has a high degree of success is the use of fencing. Fencing has a high cost, but the properly built fence can reduce deer damage from 60 to 99% at a cost from $2 a meter up to $20 a meter, depending on the type of fence that's installed. There's even some temporary fences that are energized with fence energizers that work quite well. But there are also some disadvantages of fencing. Sometimes you have to take land out of production. The fence may not be a scenic addition to your property. So people are always looking for that magic powder, that substance that you can spray on a crop or a plant to protect it from browsing. There are substances like that in nature. Tannins are a plant defensive compound that has an astringent taste. It can reduce digestibility. It reduces protein availability, but it's toxic to rumen microbes. So that results in a reduction of feeding by those large herbivores that are feeding on those tannin-based products. That's a substance that's provided in nature that's designed to protect those plants from browsing by large herbivores.
But researchers sought to harness what tannins can do to, if you will, repel animals by applying tannin-based products to standing crops?
Yes, this was a study that was done at South Dakota State University. They did the trial in 2010 and 2011 at a wildlife research facility in Brookings, South Dakota. They used a trial, what they called a cafeterial trial, where they monitored the weekly intake rates of captive deer that were offered a specially prepared feed that was treated with varying concentrations of tannins. So they had it broken down to a control, which was no tannins, and then a 3%, 5%, 10%, and 20% tannin application. That application was put on as a liquid, sprayed on a feed that was customized for deer, and mixed very thoroughly with a feed mixer, and then fed to deer in feed bunks. Then the orts or the leftover feed was measured on a daily basis, and they thus were able to monitor feed intake. They also tried spraying the tannin mixture on the top of food plots to see if that repellent would prevent grazing or browsing of deer on Roundup-ready soybeans. The results seemed to be very impressive. The intake on the control feed was 3 times greater than all of the other feeds that were treated with the tannin mixture. That's a pretty impressive reduction in consumption. And then the application on the food plots with 10 and 20% tannin solutions resulted in a 70 to a 90% reduction in probability of feeding during the summer. Now that was reduced somewhat during the fall of the year, and suspect that maybe there would be some changes there that would need to be investigated further, but it seemed to be more effective in the summer for both sexes, both male and female deer, than it was during the fall months.
Well, in either case, as fed directly to deer or as applied to food plots, those numbers speak loudly as to the efficacy of this treatment. So, would it have a future in some form or fashion as a deer repellent in various scenarios?
Well, I think it certainly has an application and deserves further research. But when they looked at the cost of this particular product, based on the 10% concentration and the application rate that they utilized, it was fairly inexpensive at about 30 cents per acre. That has great application in an ornamental situation. There may be some problems using it on agricultural crops that are destined to be used as cattle feed, because you're going to see similar reductions and problems associated with domestic livestock consuming feed grains that would have additional tannin sprayed on them. Those are going to transfer back to domestic animals. Just as they were designed to prevent deer from browsing on them, they're going to reduce consumption of domestic animals as well. So I don't think it's a panacea for all situations. It was interesting to note that they also noticed that deer stayed out of fields for multiple days after the application. So it seemed to indicate that the deer were learning and we're avoiding those areas that have been treated with the addition of tannins.
So once again, it may be an option for the future, that is, tannin-based repellents in warding deer away from an area that one wants to protect. Charlie, thanks for reporting on this work recently out of the state of South Dakota. Charlie Lee, wildlife specialist, K-State Research and Extension. And that caps off today's edition. We'd remind you one more time, if you've not looked into it, check out our podcast service. That can be accessed at agtoday.net. You can listen to each day's broadcast right there on demand. You can subscribe as well to the automatic download of the broadcast to your mobile device. Look into it at agtoday.net. In the meantime, thanks for listening in right here today. Eric Atkinson for Agriculture Today over this, the K-State Radio Network.